All right, so DeepSeek V4 Pro just dropped with a 90.1% GPQA diamond score, and Ernie 4.5 is Baidu's answer to it. I went through the benchmarks, the API cost sheets, and the third-party evals to figure out which one actually wins. Both models launched recently, and the stakes are real if you're picking one for production work. So I'm comparing them across 4 real tests. Everything traces back to name sources, vendor docs, independent press benchmarks, no vendor money involved. Honestly, the part that surprised me most is the pricing split, because which model is cheaper totally depends on whether you're reading or writing tokens, and that could flip your entire cost model. So this one's for you if you're a developer, a product team, or anyone running AI workflows who needs to pick a model and stop guessing. A wrong call here means slower responses, higher bills, or outputs that just don't work for your language or your task, and I want to help you avoid that. Test 1 is Chinese language comprehension. If you ship a Chinese-facing product and your model doesn't get the cultural nuance, users feel it immediately. Responses sound off, idioms land wrong, and you get churn, which is the kind of thing that kills trust fast and is expensive to fix after the fact. Okay, so I looked at what the data actually says here, and it's kind of thin on both sides. Ernie 4.5 is explicitly built for Chinese language and cultural nuance per Baidu's own docs and independent press, while DeepSeek V4 Pro is general multilingual with no dedicated Chinese tuning claimed. What got me is there's no third-party numeric Chinese NLP score for either model, and Baidu's claim that it beats GPT 4.0 is vendor only. Take this one with a grain of salt, right? There's no controlled benchmark confirming how big the gap actually is. So Ernie's advantage is structural. It's designed for Chinese first, but we can't put a number on it yet. If your use case is casual Chinese conversation, the design intent matters a lot, but if it's English-heavy work with some Chinese mixed in, this whole dimension might not move the needle for you. I was expecting at least one real benchmark score here, and what I got was design intent and vendor claims. But design intent is still real. Ernie 4.5 is purpose-built for Chinese, and DeepSeek V4 Pro just isn't. So Ernie takes test 1, and that puts the score at DeepSeek V4 Pro 0, Ernie 4.51. Test 2 is API latency and throughput. What actually breaks when this goes wrong is you commit to a model for production, build around it, and then at scale, you find out responses are slow, users are waiting, and you can't shop for a faster provider because no speed data was ever published. That's a real deployment risk. What surprised me here is just how one-sided the data is. DeepSeek V4 Pro across more than 10 providers, it's 167.1 tokens per second on Fireworks, with a 0.5 second time to first token on Together AI, and speed ranges from 33 to 315 tokens per second, depending on provider, which is a massive spread. Ernie 4.5, 0 published latency or throughput numbers from any source. Honestly, I was expecting at least something from Ernie's side, even a rough number, but there's nothing. You can't compare what doesn't exist, so DeepSeek V4 Pro wins this one cleanly. It's the only model with verified data you can actually act on, and that ties the score up 1-to-1. Test 3 is reasoning and multi-step problem solving. When a model fails here, it doesn't just give you a wrong answer, it gives you a confidently wrong answer. And on a coding task or a multi-step analysis that costs you hours, not minutes, because it's the kind of thing that slips right past a quick review. So I dug into the numbers, and DeepSeek V4 Pro has real scores here. 90.1% on GPQA Diamond for graduate level science reasoning, 93.5% on live code bench, 80.6% on SUGWE bench, and a Codeforces rating of 3,206, putting it 23rd among all human competitors. NIST CAIC independently evaluated it and said it lags the frontier by about 8 months. So the self-reported numbers are a bit optimistic, but they're corroborated. Ernie 4.5 has no third-party score for any of these. I was expecting Ernie's thinking variant to have at least one independent number, and it just doesn't. So vendor claims of frontier matching reasoning with no third-party verification isn't something I can score. DeepSeek V4 Pro takes test 3 on the strength of actual corroborated data, and that moves us to 2 for DeepSeek V4 Pro, 1 for Ernie 4.5. Test 4 is pricing per million tokens, and this is the one that really bites people, because you pick a model based on a headline price, run it at scale, and then realize you were looking at input cost when your workload is 90% output. That's the difference between a manageable bill and a number that makes your finance team ask questions. Okay, so here's what I found. DeepSeek Direct comes in at $0.435 per million input tokens post-discount and 87 cents per million output, while Ernie 4.5 via Silicon Flow is 29 cents per million input, but $1.15 per million output. So Ernie is cheaper to read and DeepSeek is cheaper to generate across third-party providers. DeepSeek prices vary up to 10.9 times depending on who you use, which is a lot. Now, this one's genuinely hard to call because these aren't the same product tier. DeepSeek V4 Pro gives you a 1 million token context window, and Ernie 4.5 tops out at 128,000, So that's 7.8 times more context for long documents, which makes the per token price comparison kind of apples to oranges if your use case actually needs that context. The workload type really does determine which one costs you less. Honestly, I was expecting one model to just be cheaper across the board, and that's not what happened. Input favors Ernie, output favors DeepSeek, and the context window difference makes a direct comparison pretty messy. So this one's a tie. The scoreboard sits at DeepSeek V4 Pro 2, Ernie 4.51 with one tied. So DeepSeek V4 Pro wins on hard reasoning with a 90.1% GPQA diamond and 93.5% live code bench that are independently corroborated, wins on API ecosystem with 10 plus providers and published latency data you can actually shop, wins on long document work with a 1 million token context window, and it's cheaper on output at 87 cents per million versus Ernie's $1.15. Ernie 4.5 wins on Chinese language because it's purpose-built for Chinese first applications, and DeepSeek V4 Pro has no equivalent architectural priority there. It also wins on input token cost at 29 cents per million via Silicon Flow versus DeepSeek's $0.435. And Baidu claims it beats GPT 4.0 on multimodal benchmarks, which is a dimension DeepSeek V4 Pro doesn't even show up in the research evidence for. I was expecting this to be a cleaner sweep, but the pricing test alone shows it's more complicated than that. So here's the decision rule. If you need verifiable reasoning performance, a mature API network, or long document context, go with DeepSeek V4 Pro. And if Chinese language quality is your primary concern, or your workload is read heavy and input cost drives your budget, Ernie 4.5 is the better fit.